What up? This is Yinka Diz.
Peace, this is Outlaw.
And you listen to the 80s Babies podcast.
And on today's episode, we've got a tribute, a 25-year tribute, if you will, for the sixth studio album for Janet Jackson, The Velvet Rope, released October 7th, 1997.
Yeah.
And as we usually do whenever we have a more, softer or R&B oriented album, we like to bring in one of our guests, and we've got our favorite guest.
Really?
In the
Fan
studio.
favorite guest.
Yeah.
Oh, guys.
Yeah.
Oh,
Haas,
thank you.
welcome back.
Hello.
I tried to do the spin on your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. You're our favorite guest.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to keep us straight here because it's supposed to be a woman empowerment album and we be mansplaining shit. So
no pressure.
Get us together.
So it's interesting. So when I did my notes on this, there were a bunch of themes that I was reading about, and women empowerment wasn't one of those themes. There were a bunch of other ones. But so when we were talking,
can you have a Janet album without women empowerment?
Maybe it's just a default. I just wasn't necessarily. For me, it just seems like so personal, so introspective, and such more like a therapeutic, like a venting album.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what I thought that took priority on this versus the empowerment things.
I think though you can be introspective and outrospective at the same time. And with her,
she's got a few songs on that.
Yeah. When she talks about and even the themes that she talked about, and we talked about this a little bit off mic, but some of these themes in 1997 were very taboo to be even discussed in Black discourse.
Yeah.
But to be discussed on a pop album of this magnitude was a big deal.
I got you. All right.
I think that her just, her evolution and her just being herself is essentially empowering. So I guess maybe that's why somebody would label it that. But I don't think she set out to say, oh, this is going to be an empowerment album or whatever. I agree that it is very personal, and I think there's empowerment in that.
Let me ask you, so we're going to single you out as a woman here. Right? We're going to do that.
All right.
No, but when you think of a woman empowerment album, what does that feel like to you?
It feels like freedom and liberation.
Okay.
And self-expression.
Okay.
Without consequence or concern for the consequence.
Are there any albums that we might be familiar with that you would label as female empowerment? Okay, so you were on here when we discussed Jill Scott's album and Erykah Badu's Mama's Gun. Are those female?
I was honestly gonna say Mama's Gun, but I think it's just when women explore and experiment without giving a damn, or that's the air or the essence, then I feel like inherently it's empowerment. Because
I remember, outside of the music itself, right? There was the images of this album, and I remember, and of course, I'm a preteen at this point in time, right? So this must have come out when I was 13, 14 years old. So, and I remember things like, supposedly she had nipple piercings and tattoos and, so things about what she was doing with her body were, I guess, liberating to folks because they hadn't seen those images maybe at that level.
Yeah, but I also think in context to Janet, if you think about the albums that preceded that, there's always been this struggle or this evolution of her being more vocal about who she is, especially in the context of her family. So I think even in contrast to the album that came out before this one, which was still kind of, it was Janet, but this one was more behind closed doors.
Right. This was
super X-rated.
This was the first time we saw BDSM as a pop thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe pop within a Black woman though, because Madonna had so I think if we think about how the expectation for how Black women are supposed to present themselves, even if it's not stated, she was essentially, in essence, kind of doing white shit. You know what I mean?
Maybe. And the crazy thing about it being Janet, right, is she's also somebody who we've seen grow up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the whole any girl could be because it's she's Penny from Good Times.
Right.
But then she's also tying herself up and doing all this crazy stuff. It's oh shit, yo.
Low key, the album
good girl
cover,
going bad.
The album cover to Janet was kind of the gateway. First it's I'm gonna be out here topless.
Exactly.
And then you're gonna see these nipple piercings.
Yeah. I also think it's funny that the hands on the Janet album are her husband's hands. Because it's I'm out here, but I'm not really.
Right.
A little bit.
Well, let's get into the where were you. So, Haas, as a guest, you want to start us off, and you could do several. So you could do where were you when the album was released, and if you didn't get into the album right away, where were you when you got into it?
Okay, so it was 97. It was a year. I feel like I have to give this context. It was a year after we moved back from overseas.
Okay.
So my access to music was twofold. Number one, when we were overseas, we only had like access to one channel for like 3 out of the 6 years.
Okay.
Then the following 3 years, we got cable, and then majority of the access was music videos. My parents were also super saved, so that's how I got access to music. There was no buying a bunch of albums and listening, so I had to like. You know, my access or my peak was through music videos. So I was in Stafford by this time. I was in high school, sneaking music videos. That's where I was. Yeah.
Okay. So then if you were sneaking music videos and you got to this through music videos, which one was first for you?
I believe it was it Got Till It's Gone? Which one was released first?
That was the first one.
So listen, Got Till It's Gone to this day is my favorite music video ever. Ever.
I can see it.
And then, you know, the fact that it's a Dilla production. But so it wasn't really that wasn't the racy stuff, right? Like you see low-key like earthy Janet, she's vibing, she's sweaty, you know, you have like these beautiful images,
because that was the thing where he was like they're looking through the
it was gorgeous,
the peephole, right? I vaguely remember it.
It was more of
no, it's kind of
like a juke joint, like
it's like an old school like African
juke joint.
It's this really, really soulful thing, like she's kind of performing in stage in some parts, but it's really cool. Like they got the old like vintage cameras. It's like an ode to like the photography and the style that they used to capture in things like Drum Magazine from South Africa, right? So like these vintage images of Africans in like the 50s and the 60s. That's what they were capturing.
It's gorgeous.
And it just goes with the whole vibe and everything. And it's just like a lot of beautiful black images.
In my brain, I remember like someone looking through a peephole. Is that the beginning of the video?
So I'm thinking you're thinking about Anytime, Any Place.
Oh, maybe.
And she was peeking on her neighbor.
That must be what it is.
Okay. But I think so.
That might be right.
But one more thing about the Got Till It's Gone video is that it almost didn't seem like she was the star of the focus of that video. And I think that's part of what makes it so beautiful. It is the focus on the people and the culture.
She's definitely in it. Q-Tip is in it as well. But it's like a lot of music videos, sometimes they try to sell the artist,
right?
Which they should, right? Because it's like an advertisement for the song and for the artist itself.
Yeah.
This just felt like an advertisement for beautiful black people. It was so beautiful.
That's dope.
Yeah.
So can we talk about Got Till It's Gone?
You want to talk about it now? Or you want to wait till we get to the track for track analysis?
Well, I just want to say, because to one of your points, this was the song that we discovered that has all this controversy about Jay Dilla supposedly produced it, but then he didn't get any credit.
Yes.
But then the Dilla book exposed that Jay Dilla actually didn't produce it at all.
Wait, I'm believing lies.
And he kind of took credit through the grapevine, like told his homies like, "Oh yeah, I produced that." But then Q-Tip actually came out and was like, "No, we didn't produce that at all. Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam produced it." And so
that's crazy.
I feel like you just told me Santa Claus. I need a moment.
Yes.
What? That used to be like my bag. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's still my favorite.
Everybody's like, yo, my favorite Ghost production.
I need a moment. I need a moment.
That's crazy, because that was always one that I attributed to his catalog.
We all did. And so when the book came out, essentially they went down the line of like, yo, you know, Q-Tip, like, did he produce this? How did this happen?
Yeah.
And essentially what Q-Tip was saying is that, so Jam and Lewis were kind of influenced by many different genres, which you can hear on the album. And clearly one of them was kind of like, you know, this kind of hip hop genre. And Janet really liked Q-Tip and Q-Tip's voice. So they wanted to do something that was inspired by kind of what Q-Tip and Tribe were doing, but more so what the Uma were doing. And there was a specific, I think Jazzy Fat Nasty's song that Dilla had produced that they were really influenced by. And so I want to say they reached out to Q-Tip and asked him for like some drums or something that were like part of what the Uma were doing. And so they took like one or two of those drums and they made a beat that was inspired by this Dilla Jazzy Fat Nasty song. And then they made it, but then when it started to blow up, Dilla kind of felt away because they stole his swag.
Yeah.
So then Dilla's homies started to be like, yo, that sounds like you. So then he told his friends like, yeah, I did that shit.
I'm gonna be toxic and be like, it's still
That's
his.
so funny.
And so according to Q-Tip, and Q-Tip's like, I don't want to discredit the homie or whatever, but nah, like Jam and Lewis did that joint.
Wow.
So inspired
Inspired by J Dilla.
Uh-huh.
I need a moment. Go ahead.
Anyway, that was all I wanted to say was because many people believed, myself included, believed that was a Dilla beat.
So where were you when you got into, or when you first, I guess, digested the album? Was it college years or?
It was definitely college. So yeah, when the album came out, high school, I was not. I listened to whatever the singles were, but then afterwards, when I guess I was more in a space to really listen to the music, I was like, okay, so yeah, college, yeah.
And you're not as familiar with this album, so
Not so much.
go ahead.
Yeah, so my Where Were You is like is more weird, and yours is probably even weirder than mine is. But I would say like a horny teenager. You know what I'm saying? Like I know this video from the Velvet Rope tour, or this album from the Velvet Rope tour.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid and it being so taboo that like she was doing these shows and you would see on the news these little clips of like some guy and he's tied up to something and Janet's climbing all over him and he's losing his shit. Yeah. He's like, oh my God,
I love you.
know what I mean?
I love you,
I love you, Janet, and all that. So that's my first memory of this is being, I want to say this came out between my 8th grade and early 9th grade years.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so the reason I say 8th grade or early 9th grade is 8th grade, I remember I Get So Lonely.
Mm-hmm.
The remix with Teddy Riley, the Blackstreet version. The Blackstreet version was all over the radio. It was my jam. When we would go to daycare to pick my little sister up, that joint was always on the radio. That was my joint. So 97. So this is No Diggity time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So Blackstreet is the biggest shit in the world. Mm-hmm. Janet is already Janet. So it's like you put those two things together, it's huge. So that's the first thing I remember. It was that song. And then the next thing I remember is the Velvet Rope tour. Yeah. Where it's just like everybody is losing their shit. Yeah. And it's like, it's coming on Fox News where they're saying like, is this woman perverting America? Everybody's going to turn into a pervert. She's piercing herself. She's tattooing herself. They're going crazy.
She was first to do it.
Yeah,
clearly.
She was doing that. So I remember that. And then the other thing that I really remember is the Go Deep music video.
Yes.
And I remember being a kid and
like
I didn't watch
Suds, right? Like a house party.
Yeah, the house party.
It's
And I
like
remember
a fantasy dream thing.
I remember that because, I'm like a 9th grader, let's say, right? So like I just remember wanting to be at that party so bad,
Real.
And I hadn't seen a lot of music videos, but this video, if y'all remember, it was the first video that was kind of shot in this like
fisheye.
Well, no, but it's a reverse joint where it's like, and the only reason I know this is because we were gonna do a video like this for me so basically they have a harness that they put on the person, and then the camera is facing him. So he's walking around, and for folks that haven't seen this video, the premise of the video is there's this young guy. He looks like he's like maybe in high school. His parents leave to go do something, and he's home alone. And then a knock at the door comes and he opens the door and it's Janet with a few of her friends. Yeah. So, they're bad chicks. He's a youngish guy, so he lets them in. But then another knock comes at the door and then more people are coming in. And so then Janet's inviting more and more people and they're all coming. So before you know it, this house party is getting out of control. And so then he goes to the kitchen to try to pop popcorn for her, but then the popcorn starts going crazy because he puts too much in there because he's super excited, and then there's popcorn everywhere, and then he goes to try to do laundry, and then because he spills something on his
I don't remember the popcorn. You remember
he goes into the bedroom
vivid.
And he sees someone drop spilled wine or juice on the sheet, so he goes and does fills up the sheets, fills the laundry, fills the sheets.
But then he puts too much detergent in there.
And then the suds fill up the house.
And then the suds fill up the whole house. And the party's going crazy. People are just having fun. It's like a foam party. They wilding out. I just remember being a 9th grader and being like, yo, I wish I was at that party. Like, that party just looked so cool. So those were the things I remember. I remember the images around this. I remember all of the singles were huge. But I remember that more than the album itself. And I would say I really only probably listened to this album to do this podcast because I don't think I've ever actually heard the album before.
Just to piggyback off of that with the Go Deep, in my notes I said this is the typical 90s party from every high school teen movie.
Right.
But the fact that it's Janet Jackson who looks so sexy.
She looks great.
Like and she looks great without being like the scantily clad, whatever, right? She's just gorgeous in this video.
Right. And it's funny because you think about it, right? Like she's doing the velvet rope thing, which is, dudes losing their shit over her. And this is like that, but like toned down, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you're a 10th grader or however old this guy was, and Janet Jackson knocks on your door, you're gonna do exactly what he did.
Of course.
And then you're probably gonna be super excited and you're gonna lose your shit just like he did, ruin your whole house, but then he wakes up and it's a dream.
Yeah,
it's such a great video. Like so for me, you talk about the Got Till It's Gone video. This Go Deep video to me is one of my favorite music videos of all time. I remember seeing that and just being so impressed by the camera, the angle, and being the age where like the what the video was about really resonated with me. So that's where I was. Where were you?
Look, so when this album comes out, I remember that this is like pre-Wu-Tang. The reason why I bring up pre-Wu-Tang.
Everything is Wu-Tang.
No, but the reason why I bring that up is because in 1997, 1998, that to me was my really like inception into really, really having a passion for music.
Right.
That wasn't just on the radio. Okay. Right. So this is before that time. And so, but what I did get though was I did get like the D'Angelo's Brown Sugar. So that was an album that I was listening to. Yeah. I did like the TLC,
Crazy
Sexy Cool.
Yeah. Was that 97 too?
No, that was like 94, 95.
95. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But the thing is though, is that the reason why I bring up Brown Sugar is because like that was an album that I enjoyed at the time. Maxwell is also coming out on the radio. And so there's there's kind of like an insurgence of these like black kind of soulful R&B acts that weren't just like pop R&B. Right. Janet Jackson, while she was a pop artist, was more of the pop R&B, right?
Yeah.
But then she comes out with the Got Till It's Gone video.
Okay.
And this is at a time where, when I identify as being Black, African American, right? But that's not necessarily the household I grew up in. Okay. Right? Like if you meet my dad, and you meet my parents, while they were trying to, help assist me with the Black identity, I didn't really grow up in that kind of like Black soulful vibes household. You know what I mean? I credit my affinity for classic rock from my dad. You know what I mean? So like, and my dad didn't really listen to James Brown or Al Green in the 70s, right? And so for me, I'm getting my images. I'm getting roasted in school for not knowing half of this shit, but I'm getting my images from music videos. Okay. And so when I see Janet Jackson and I see this Got Till It's Gone video, I see all that blackness. Like something about it was just so mesmerizing for me, right? So there's that. And then you had the We Go Deep video. And then you had the Together. Well, I think Together Again came out first, right?
That video was iconic as well.
All the videos low key.
All the videos are crazy, right? So then you have some of like the more the Black imagery from that as well. And there's a lot of, I guess, progressive, if you will, imagery in Together Again. But nevertheless, and then you go into the We Go Deep. They had music videos coming out for that for a while.
Even I Get Lonely, the Blackstreet one was a crazy video.
So listen, I still know some of the choreo from that video.
That video was ill.
That was definitely like come home from school, before my parents got home. Having a little sneak session, and I'm learning choreo in the living room.
Because she had the lingerie top.
It was kind of like it was almost like with the dark. Hat, right? There were it was like this contrast of like dark, deep purples and like it almost feels cold, and then there's like this juxtaposition of like brightness too, and then I feel like Janet went through different eras with her hair. So this was like her ginger red hair era. Yeah. So like all of that was kind of, even in all of the other videos, there was still a reference to like red hair in some way, shape, and form, whether it was curly or straight. And so she was, that video was.
Yeah.
The thing too about the videos and the releases is, right, like this is our first pop album that we've ever covered on this podcast. And so I think the thing that we need to remember about these big albums from the 90s is that it wasn't just like a week-long thing, a month-long thing. It was like a year and a
Yes.
half to 2 years
Yes.
thing.
True.
The Velvet
true.
Rope tour was part of that, but like
Yep.
also it's like some of these videos, like they go through stages. And so like Got Till It's Gone is obviously targeting a more like Black soulful audience. Together Again is the more world vibe.
Yeah.
We Go Deep and I Get Lonely. That's a Black R&B artist. And then you
Yes.
even had the Every Time video where she's like naked in the bathtub.
Yes.
But
Oh,
she's
I
got
didn't
her
know.
straight wavy hair, which is definitely appealing to a more pop oriented audience, right? But
okay.
these things, they lasted for so long.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I was. And the thing is that at the time, like I said, you had to be very selective with the money that you use to buy whichever albums, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And
Oh, you bought this?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
And buying a pop album was not something that I really wanted to dedicate my money towards. But I almost bought this album. This album
Wow.
is like one of like my biggest regrets from the 90s that I didn't get to grow up with this album because I really wanted to, right? There were so many songs, there were so many singles that I just liked that I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy this pop album. But my big sister at the time, Cecily, and we recently had a conversation about this.
Uh-oh.
Cecily is like 5 or 6 years older than I was.
Okay.
And she was like, nah, you won't really like Velvet Rope. Singles are cool, but the album's like, man, like, don't buy this album. I spoke to her about this recently, and I was like, yo, I'm mad at you for telling me not to buy it. She's like, you were too young. And I was like, oh, okay.
Too.
I kind of get it.
Yeah, I would also just like to note that the songs that stuck out to me are the wholesome-ish versions compared to the you talking about the concerts and the BDSM. I was not even exposed to that. Like it's very interesting how she was able to tap into different,
That's interesting that you say that because, I think it's also about like the vantage points of our, different upbringing. For me, my dad's from Nigeria and he's very tapped into world events. And so I grew up in a household where CNN or BBC was always on. So I always knew what was on the news. And sometimes I consumed my pop culture through the lens of whatever the news was saying. So I consumed this, album and tour through the youth of America is being corrupted by blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So like that's kind of how I saw it.
The Velvet Rope tour was on HBO for like 2 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think they said, I have a note here about the Velvet Rope tour. Hold on. It was on HBO, receiving 15 million viewers, surpassing the ratings of all 4 major networks. And by the end of that tour, over 10 million people worldwide had attended that tour.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The other thing that's crazy that I read about this, and I'm sure you probably also read this, was I remember because again I'm consuming a lot of news. This album was the first that she did on Virgin, and Virgin gave her $80 million.
Wasn't the first. She renewed with Virgin.
Okay, that's what it was. But she got $80 million. And that was like the most money that any artist had ever received for a contract.
So she was on Virgin. They needed to renegotiate. At the time, the two biggest deals on the planet were Michael Jackson and Madonna. Both had $60 million deals.
Okay.
Janet Jackson renewed with Virgin for $80 million.
Okay.
Yes.
I remember hearing that on the news as well. That this was like the biggest record contract.
I mean, that's empowering. That's empowering.
There you go.
That's empowerment.
Especially more than Michael, because it seemed like it seemed like in this like mid '90s time frame, it was like her and Michael was kind of like quietly competing with each other. You know what I mean?
So, I had a note about that. Okay, so kind of in the critical reception, I was reading some of the notes, but it was saying that this is from the Los Angeles Times, that the album became more eagerly anticipated than Michael's output, taking her once and for all out of the shadow. But the thing is that Michael hadn't really, he'd been going through all those legal problems. He hadn't really been given all that much since he did, was it Dangerous?
Yeah, exactly.
And so this was the one that really brought her out of the shadow and made Janet like top or whatever.
That's real also, because that's a good point. I think also something that people don't talk about so much is that in this time frame, Michael was experimenting, right? Because he went from the Michael and Quincy, which was Jordan and Pippen.
Yeah.
And then he kind of had like a falling out with Quincy that we barely hear about. Quincy talks about it here and there. And then he goes to Teddy Riley. Dangerous was Teddy Riley, right?
I believe it was more than
that. So then that's like mostly Teddy Riley. And I want to say I read somewhere that Teddy Riley was actually the one who introduced Janet to Jammin' Lewis or something like that. It was something
really?
Interesting like that. But anyway, so he's with Teddy, but it doesn't seem like the Teddy thing really all the way. Like the albums that Teddy worked on with Michael are like not his most favorable albums.
Look, the Holy Trilogy for Michael Jackson is the Quincy Jones trilogy, right? So
exactly.
Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad.
Right. So that happens. And then, like you said, he's going through legal troubles, but he's also trying to figure out what the Michael identity is.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because maybe Janet then kind of takes over, right?
Maybe. I mean, 1995, they have the
Scream.
Scream.
Right. That was iconic.
First $1 million video, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it was crazy budget for that.
I mean, but even I looked at that video recently, not too long ago, and it's still.
Is it?
Oh.
I just remember being
I think it carries well, even considering how much was spent on it back then.
I just remember being a kid and seeing Janet standing up pissing. And for whatever reason, to me, that was just like, what the fuck is this? This is insane.
That was great.
So yeah, that was an iconic video. Anyway.
So all right. So back to my no. It's all good stuff. But so back to my where were you when I started to get into this album? So actually, I really didn't really start digesting this album until maybe about like 3 or 4 years ago. But that's not really the where were you, right? Mm-hmm. So what made me start to first revisit this album was back in 2008. Now I'm going to go on a lot of different tangents here.
We're going on a
lot
journey.
of different tangents here. All right. So
buckle up.
At the time, so I'm now currently an Arsenal supporter, but at the time, I rooted for Barcelona for whatever reason, right? All right. Okay. There was a Malian player on the team named Seydou Keita, who for whatever reason, I just kind of wanted to see like, what is this player like doing in the midfield? So I'm YouTube Seydou Keita. What ends up coming up is a different Seydou Keita, who's a photographer from back in the day.
Okay.
And the YouTube video, someone did this thing for like a school project. It was called Seydou Keita, Conjurer of Images. And what they did was they did this video essay about this photographer and all like the old school photos that he took.
Okay.
Right. So the way that this whole thing comes together is like a 9-minute video, and there's so many different directions. But this is all right. So the music in the background is actually from this group called Amadou and Mariam, who I believe that they're from Mali. And the album, I forget the name of the album, but it came out in like 2004. And there's 2 songs, Artistitia or something like that, and like Kulubali. So these are the 2 songs that are interspersed throughout this video, right? So this video essay made me discover who those were, right? And at the time, I'm really into African music. So okay, so put a pin on that. But hold on.
Are you
so
keeping track?
So the photos though are the photos from Seydou Keita, but it's also interspersed with the music video, right? Guess what that music video was?
Got Till It's Gone.
Got Till It's Gone.
Got it.
Which made me go back and revisit Got Till It's Gone. So you see this whole video and the music is great. I discovered a new group. I'm seeing all these images and I'm seeing like the Got Till It's Gone video.
Yeah.
And that's at a time in 2008, 2009, right before I discovered the Afrobeat for Your Soul parties, right? Okay. And what vibe did the Afrobeat for Your Soul parties have? The same vibe from Got Till It's Gone. This is a very, very monumental, a very, very formative period in my life.
This is around the time that I met you.
It was around that time,
yeah.
exactly. And so before that, in 2008, 2009, when I wanted to go out to party, we went to lounges, we went out to clubs, whatever, right? All of a sudden, I get into this vibe where it's just like, nah, you get to wear whatever you want. You get to listen to this African music that has the same kind of vibe from the Amadou and Mariam. And then the images were all images, like very, very Black images that like I'm now connecting to. It's a very, very formative period in my life. Yeah. But it also then makes me go back and revisit Janet Jackson and Got Till It's Gone, and reconnect with something that I liked from back in the day, but I never really got into.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So now I'm also, I'm getting into Erykah Badu around this time, Raphael Sadiq, and it's just a very, very monumental period in my life that I just have a very, very deep connection to that song in particular. Yeah. And then going back to then just revisit the rest of this album and kind of grow with it. And then, just throughout the years, this would be the Janet Jackson album that I would always just go back and listen to. But that was just a very, very important period in my life. And so just a lot of attachment to that. Yeah. So that's kind of my where were you when I decided to reconnect with this album.
Yeah.
So
that's what's up. So
there we go. Anyway. Cool. So should we do the critical reception?
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's a lot to go through on the wiki. This album, not only does it have I think I read through the entire wiki. It took me like 45 minutes to go through it. I'm a slow reader, but it's a lot. The tour has its own Wikipedia page. It's crazy.
It has to. It needs to.
Yeah. I would say that the tour at some point probably became more popular than the actual album.
Probably.
The experience.
The funny thing too is that we talk about these sexy images from Janet Jackson on the Janet cover, right? Now the Velvet Rope image, it's not that at all.
Yeah.
She's kind of looking down. You just see her hair is curly,
but it's red. Like,
it is red, right? But the imagery, the advertisement, the billboard for the tour is not that. It's racy. This is the one where she's kind of like in this see-through thing with her underwear, whatever, and she looks sexy as hell. It was causing traffic accidents in Europe. It's crazy. So
1997. We love you.
But nevertheless,
right now, if you probably put that same image out right now, you probably open up your Instagram and it's probably racier images than that right now.
It's true. But nevertheless, though, great album, right? It's not her highest selling. Yep. Though I do think it has her highest selling single on this.
Which is Got Till It's Gone?
No, Together Again. So 6 million worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, but that was more of like a world pop like feel. So I can see.
I'm just a little surprised because Got Till It's Gone to me is like one of her most iconic records.
I think it is, but it's also kind of like it's kind of neo soul-y in contrast to like the other sounds that are on this project.
Is it one of her more iconic records for people like us, or for like just the traditional Janet?
I think everybody, and maybe my context for white people is living in Europe for those 2 years in high school.
All right,
but like. The same classmates I had that would listen to ABBA records all day. They were also listening to this album, and particularly "Got Till It's Gone." They loved that song, just random white kids. So I assume that it's really really big because when it made their vantage point, to me that meant like it was out of here.
See, I would say from where I was. I Get Lonely probably had more traction because it was very much R&B, and then like you said before, add Blackstreet to it,
And Teddy Riley, Virginia. I mean, even though he's not from Virginia, we kind of have co-opted him, right? So.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So I see. I'm sorry to
no,
cut
it's
you
okay.
off.
I mean,
I see though also that there were a lot of remixes. And Got Till It's Gone has an Armin van Helden remix.
Yeah,
and that might be one of the reasons why all those white kids knew it.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, because especially at that time, remixing a pop record into like a house techno track is definitely going to get a lot of traction in Europe.
Right.
So, nevertheless, though, I mean, it's a I think critical reception. I mean, we all know about this album. It's a great album. There were probably some mixed reviews at the time, but I think for me, the thing that's interesting, there's a lot of notes on this, so we can talk about that. But the thing that stood out to me the most was a quote from Drew Millard of The Vice or whatever.
Okay.
And he said that the album inadvertently predicts most of the cooler trends in contemporary indie music. So he says that like Damn Funk's whatever song, Bedroom Key, whatever attack, that's like Go Deep, right? He says Together Again is basically the song that Disclosure has been shooting for this entire time, which is low key. Wow. Look, I love Disclosure, but it's kind of true, right?
Came for him.
What'd you say?
Came for him.
Yeah. And then he says, Tom Crow, who I don't know who that is, would wrestle an alligator with his bare hands to create a song as chillingly beautiful as Empty. Yeah. I'm not familiar with that artist, but I do think, though, that one of the things I loved about this album, and someone else said it as well, I didn't quote it, but it touches on so many different genres.
For sure.
And for it to all come together as one cohesive project is very, very impressive.
Yes.
I mean, you've got hip hop on here. You've got indie soul on here. You've got rock on here. You've got experimental progressive stuff on here. You got like R&B, slow ballads.
Yeah.
There's so much on here.
Absolutely.
You've got funk disco records on here. You've got drum and bass on here several times.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just expands a lot of different genres, and to do it so well, even though I don't like every song on the album, that's fine. To do it so well, to be so cohesive, I think is a testament to its longevity, which is one of the reasons why I know it's a pop record, but it's one of the reasons why I really wanted. I thought that this album just deserved a discussion from the '80s babies. So
I like
there you
it.
go.
I like it.
How am I supposed to follow that? He said it all.
You don't have to, but maybe then, if you want to go into what your highlights are,
Yeah.
that'd be a good way to follow that.
Yeah, the overarching
Yeah,
highlights.
So the overarching highlights for me, I would say that the singles were super strong. The visuals,
Yeah.
I'm an artist, so like
yeah.
the way that she was able to pair the visuals with the music, I think it absolutely propelled it. Obviously, her being able to have like this is essentially, I won't say like a diary entry, but if you think about what she was dealing with, to be able to put that in musical form. I mean, granted, every album in a sense is kind of like, some form of introspection or whatever, but for her to be able to do that and to do it in so many different ways musically, I think are my main highlights.
Yeah.
I just wanted to interject a point about or include a point when you're talking about the diary, right?
Mhm.
Is that one of my overarching highlights was the interludes,
Mhm.
particularly the ones where she's just kind of saying like a little like poem.
Mhm.
They feel almost like diary entries.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think
Absolutely. I've got the
that's helps, tie the album together as well.
Yeah. What other highlights do you have?
I've already mentioned it before about the diversity in genres.
Absolutely.
That's a really big one. I don't really have anything else to add to that. The black imagery we see presented by Janet, and it's mixed, right? Because like I said, on every time she's thinner, she's got this wavy hair. It's much more white friendly on that. But then the first couple videos, right? Got Till It's Gone, Together Again, and Go Deep. That's very, very black.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you note that, because that's essentially what she was struggling with, her body, her body issues, so you see these different sides of her. It almost kind of supports everything that she's, expressing in these songs.
Yeah. I actually don't have any other overarching highlights. I've already mentioned them. I was talking about basically the cohesiveness and the being able to sequence all these genres together. I'll also just say, in terms of like the music itself, the front half of the album is definitely the one that resonates more with me.
Got you.
Yeah.
I've got production. I said Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis are the GOATs to me. Like I've told you this. They're in my, my Mount Rushmore next to Quincy and next to whoever else is the greatest. And I think this is one of the great works in their catalog.
I was gonna ask, do you think that this might be their crown jewel?
It's one of them. It's one of them. But I think who did Rhythm Nation? I think that might be the one where everybody was like, okay, Janet Jackson and Jam and Lewis. In the same way that it's Thriller and with Quincy and Michael.
This was also, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
Yeah. So I think that was the record where it was like the relationship was established, where everybody was like, oh, this is the marriage.
Here's the question though. Was that album more like New Jack Swing? Was like all the genres all the same? So the reason why I would argue that this might be their crown jewel is because of the amount of different musics. Amount of different palettes that they were putting together and still have it come together.
And that's what I was gonna say, right? That the reason I have them as my number one highlight is exactly that. Like just that diversity. I said, genre bending musical experimentation. There's a record with a James Brown sample, which is there's nothing more straight up just hip hop than just sampling a popular James Brown record. But the way they weave like two more genres into the same record is incredible. Like they really experimented, they really bended genres. And they did things that I would say, if it weren't them, I would say they were biting, but they made it their own.
That's true.
So like the Dilla thing, right? Which Dilla, it actually ends up getting revenge, right? He made a remix to the song called the Dilla's Revenge or something like that, right? Where he ends up remixing them doing him.
Yeah.
But and this is one of my favorite things about this record, there are multiple records where they steal DJ Quick's glockenspiel sound. Go Deep is one of them.
Oh,
they literally
and
they admit that shit. They were on the Questlove podcast and at Jam and Lewis, and they were like, yeah, we heard these DJ Quick records and we liked them, so we tried to emulate that sound. So it's like they didn't they weren't too referential of their influences, but at the same time they were influenced by all these different things, and it made this gumbo pot of just like one thing that sounds like it belongs together, and that's amazing.
Hearing that they produced Got Till It's Gone really recontextualizes Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
They're amazing.
Like, that's a that's a really impressive record for them to.
Yeah.
That's not their bag.
It's like they can do anything, and that's why I respect it. You know, it's like Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Babyface and L.A. Reid are like, you know, these are like people that you can just walk in off the street. They're gonna have a conversation with you. They're gonna write your whole life. They're gonna produce it and make it sound great, and you're gonna be like, oh shit, this is my story. That's crazy, you know. So that's my second highlight. Jam and Lewis as writers. I think Jam and Lewis, and they talked about that a little bit also on the Questlove podcast. They talked about the kind of the writing process with Janet, and that, you know, not similar to the last project that they worked on with Janet. Previously, they said Janet was a really hard worker, and that, you know, she would come in and be like, all right, let's work. But on this one, because she was going through things emotionally, there would be days where she would come in and she wouldn't even want to record, or she would want to take days off because she wasn't
apparently
feeling
she took like 6 months off or something like that. Something crazy.
And then I think that she like locked in for like a real 6 months. But I think it took 2 years. It took 2 years in total to get this done. But, you know, with Jam and Lewis, right, like they essentially were having conversations with her and pulling these memories, these repressed memories and things out of her to turn them into songs.
Therapy?
Yeah. Well, but then you turn it into a song and the person's comfortable sharing it. Like, that's amazing.
I think there was a note that I saw about, it's just kind of like the conflict of, you're pulling out these things to produce this art, but then you have to relive it every time you perform it.
Yeah.
So
that's real.
Holding on to the memory doesn't mean holding on to the pain. Is that that's something that she says?
Yes.
You don't have to hold on to the pain to hold on to the memories.
Yeah. It's just amazing, like when you think about it. And I mean, I think Babyface is probably the best at this. But they said basically what they did from Rhythm Nation on was like, you know, Janet she's this creative woman that has these ideas, but you know, they're like, okay, how do we turn that into gold? And so basically they brought her to, you know, Edina, Minnesota, like where they're from, and like, you know, sit her down on this in this living room. And they said that they would just like, she would just be sitting there just watching TV. And then they would just come in and just like sit down and just have conversations with her. So what's going on with your life? And, you know, they'd like think about it. And then they'd go away and then be like, all right, check this out. And it'd be a reference of something that was a conversation that they had with her.
Interesting.
And they would turn it into a song. And then she'd be like, okay, I want to change this. Let's do it like this. And she would like lay vocals. So that's how they write together.
That's fascinating.
It's amazing. So Jam and Lewis as writers. And then the interludes. Yeah. You said that as well. I said, you know, I think they string the album together well.
They definitely do.
And they also explain the concept.
They
because,
do.
You know, there's this overarching concept that it kind of comes in and out throughout the songs. And then lastly, I said themes. I think, you know, I can't hammer home enough that this was 1997. And, you know, I think while certain things were taboo in 1997, certain things were also even more taboo in the Black community.
This is true.
We gave, you know, Kendrick a lot of props on his latest album because some of the topics that he talked about, while they may not be so taboo for America in 2022, many of them are very taboo in the Black community.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's like, you know, for her to be a Black woman and canvassing some of these topics, it was pretty controversial and amazing.
That's cool.
So those are my highlights.
All right. Do we have any overarching lowlights?
I've got one.
I would say, so when we did the D'Angelo episode, we referenced how he kind of has this mumbly thing that he does.
Yeah.
With Janet, her voice is so breathy and soft.
Yeah.
For just going back to some of these themes and these topics that she was talking about, you're talking about domestic violence, you're talking about homophobia in some instances, you're talking, you know, like the lyrics, some of the lyrics were so powerful, but then you kind of like only catch a glimpse of it. So like you might get caught up in the vibe and not even real, and maybe that was intentional, but I think, I mean, I guess that attests to, I mean, just being authentic with the music and not being like, this is going to be this type of album. So maybe there's authenticity with that, but I think that, you know, maybe some articulation or at least some distinction.
I think I agree with you, but then I almost disagree a little bit in that, like, I think that it's something that makes Janet such a unique performer.
Sure.
Because on certain records, she is articulate, and on other records, she's less articulate, and you can tell that she's making intentional choices.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a complaint, but it's like, wait, what was that? Like, wait. And then, especially when you have these high lows, like these soft periods and these intense moments. And granted, that's probably part of the expression, but then it's like, oh damn, like Free Zone.
Yeah.
For a second, I was like, oh wait, what's oh, okay. So like if you're telling these stories, at some one would hope that you would want people to kind of catch what's going on, but it's not like a big flaw, but it was just kind of like, oh, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think additionally, as a vocal performer, while sometimes she's less articulate and more articulate, I think something else to keep in mind is, she's not a vocal powerhouse like a Beyonce, right? And so for I think really the song You on here is the only record where I heard her and I was like, oh, I can tell that like she's not the strongest vocalist, right? Like, and that's no diss to her, but she's clearly making different choices in how she's articulating her vocals, and I think she's doing that intentionally.
Yeah.
I think my only low light was I said this is very much a pop album, and by pop album I mean pop albums tend to be very thin outside of their singles. Yeah. And this is an album that if you take the singles away, I'm cool. It's an EP that I'm not interested in. However, the singles are more than half of the album. Yeah. So it's like, if you were to take the singles away, you don't even have an album anymore. You have an EP. So yeah.
For me, I said it's a little long and there's some stretches that are it's 75 minutes. Yeah. And there's some dull stretches on the back half. Like, I'm not a big fan of Every Time. Okay. And Empty is cool. What it's talking about is cool. But like some of the sequencing of some of those songs, I'm like, you like Every Time?
I like Every Time too.
So I like Every Time, but if we're in terms of sequencing, you have pop. What About, where she's talking about like being in an abusive relationship. And then Every Time is like, I don't even know. Like, I'm afraid of this idea of love because of what I've experienced.
That's
like
true.
And it's so, I mean, I could get why that's probably not a thing for you, but like, I mean, in terms of like the softness or whatever. But yeah, I think that's the only reason why I can kind of appreciate it.
Yeah, I got you. But even like songs like Rope Burn, like that stretch is not, they're fine, but it's not like, when I did get into this album, that was a part of the like I just kind of skipped that stuff. I didn't really start getting into those songs until recently because I wanted to do this album.
I feel like Rope Burn is probably a song that makes women feel sexy. So
it's a couple of joints on here. Yeah.
So I don't know that would do that for us.
All right, so let's do the track for track analysis. And some of these songs we've already spoken to at length. So but just so right off the top, Twisted Elegance and Velvet Rope. Highlight, low light. How do you feel about it?
I'll let you go first.
Well, so for me, again, I'm engaging with this album years later. Yeah. We have talked about Whoop Whoop by Cam and DJ Pooh. This is clearly the same sample, Hobo Scratch. And I know, whoa, and I, as a kid growing up in California, Whoop Whoop was very important. And so I thought that the choice, with these both being records that came out in 1997, the choice of that sample was interesting to me. And then I also felt like the Tubular Bells, kind of Exorcist theme, also being a part of it. Like the production was interesting to me. So I don't know that I love or hate this song. I just kind of was like, okay, this is interesting.
I think it was Velvet Rope kind of made me want to like pop and lock a little bit. But if you think about, I mean, it attests to the different sounds. But for that to be like the intro, and then to hear the singles, it was like, oh wait.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure.
What'd you think?
It's a highlight for me from the music, from the musicality. All the things you talked about, the woot woot. When jam into it, I'm listening to the song and I'm like, oh, the Velvet Rope, but I'm also like, woot woot. But also too, it says featuring Vanessa Mae, and she is, I'm not familiar with who she is, but she's doing the violin that sits at the end, and that's. We like a good string inclusion in a record, and especially around this time, like putting like the strings into a record like this. I don't know, it works for me. So from a musicality standpoint, it's definitely a highlight.
Dope.
Then we get into to you. Thoughts on this highlight?
I think it's a highlight because I'll just rest on the video. It gave insight into the tour.
That's true.
And so,
Haven't
I
seen
mean,
it.
it's kind of, it's a bop. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, it was cool for me.
I felt like this record was the most quirky when it came to production and her vocal choices. So this is probably my least favorite song off the top of my head.
Really?
Like it's kind of like a melee for me.
It was a highlight for me again because I liked it musically. For me, this is like one of the Timbaland inspired productions as well, particularly with the drums,
The double
with
time drums.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, the other thing too, it's a highlight because self-reflection, I think, is a very big thing for me. If you know me personally, I always talk about like think about your actions, and this is very much like the you is like the mirror version of yourself, right? It's like, and so that aspect of it is really cool. Some of the things are like a little heavy-handed, like so for example, she spells conscience backwards to like at the end of the song, so it's supposed to be like your conscience in the mirror view of it. A little heavy-handed, but nevertheless, like I think thematically, it works for me. So in that regard, especially look, all this whole run at the beginning, this whole front half of the album, I could just listen to this whole thing on loop. So it's in my run. So yeah, it's definitely a highlight for me. So all right. Then we get into Got Till It's Gone featuring Q-Tip, and Joni Mitchell is cited in the credits as well, even though they just sampled her. But or does she actually come in and sing? I don't think so.
Well, that's her voice.
That's her voice.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though because oftentimes when you sample someone, it's not featuring a person. You know, it's just
you know why, right?
Why is that?
Because them niggas tried to pillage on the
they'll get that money.
Yeah, the credit. In order for them to clear that sample, they made them credit Joni Mitchell's estate, and they had to pay like I want to say they paid like 100% or something on the record.
You know, it's crazy too. So first of all, I just want to say this is my highlight of highlights.
Yeah.
Yes. Agree.
Yeah. But the other thing too is that wow, I'm curious if she got any money from this at all because
Joni
not
Mitchell.
only that, are you familiar with Desiree?
Oh, I saw that, but she didn't lose that lawsuit.
Sued and won 25% of the royalties. Yo, the reason why is because Janet's verse, the melody in that verse is a straight rip from one of Desiree's songs. It's called "Feel So High."
I went and listened to the song because I vaguely remembered the song.
Yeah.
And when it came in, I was like, "What? What
it's not on the hook. It's her verse is stealing the melody from the hook. It's the same way that.
Oh my goodness!
So Sam Smith got sued by Tom Petty for the "Stay with me, cause you're all I need," which is the same thing from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Like, stand my ground, never turn. Tom Petty won, and a lot of people were upset about that. They're like, no, like, because I remember when I heard the Sam Smith song, I was like, why does this sound so familiar? It's because Tom Petty was like, yo, you stole my vocal thing. George Ben also sued Rod Stewart for Taj Mahal. If you think I'm sexy, he stole that from Taj Mahal. So there's a history of recording artists being able to sue other folks for like, no, you stole my vocal melody.
Yeah,
it's a straight rip from Desiree's joint. I heard it yesterday, and I was like, nah, she jacked it. So it is what it is. So I'm just curious if they got any money at all from this.
Probably not. It's probably, but I mean, they probably made so much just off how big this record was. That promotion, being able to perform it on tour, whatever, she probably made way more than they lost.
The video won a Grammy too.
Dope.
But look, nevertheless, there's not. I'm not. If you guys have anything else to add about it, we've already spoken ad nauseam about the song, but it's beautiful. You got to go back and look at the video, man. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'll watch it after this. The one thing I'll say about this Joni Mitchell sample, I had a teacher, shout out to Mr. Jones. I had a teacher in, I want to say the 11th grade when I was in Brussels. And he was really into like pop music, but from that era. He was the one who introduced me to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
That's dope.
We actually covered it in my 11th grade English class and had to write papers on it and everything. So that's how I got into the Beatles. But he also had us do Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell. And I actually had to do like a finals paper or something like that on it.
It's a good song for sure.
Yeah,
it's a song. It's not
song.
An album, right? It's just a song.
It's a song. Yeah.
They'll put up a parking lot.
And so, exactly. So I was very familiar with that song through that. And it's interesting that I think Joni Mitchell's, I don't know if it's her or her estate, but they're very stringent about like how their music is used and making sure they get the money and all that other stuff. So, which is interesting because Big Yellow Taxi is about capitalism.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's interesting that they're so heavy-handedly capitalist when it comes to their music. But anyway.
The only other note I have is that I do think, and you've already touched on it, I do think that her singing voice is limited, right? But that being said, I can't imagine another voice on this record.
She sounds great on this joint. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. So now we get into speakerphone interlude. Look, what I will say about this. So first of all, that's Lisa Marie Presley that she's talking to.
Okay.
The only thing I find really amusing is that, like, how are you going to call someone while you're masturbating? Like, if she was masturbating and she got the phone call, that's one thing. But I'm like, I called you and I put you on speaker while I'm masturbating, and I told you to hold on.
Haas looked like she did that shit before.
No.
She over here
what I was
looking
gonna
embarrassed.
say is, when I realized the first time I was like, "Oh, this is wild! Like, wow, this
Bro, if
is
somebody calls you and they're not dating you.
It's
and
really the audacity. Wow. And on one hand, it's like,
shit.
wait, is she for? Oh, she's for real.
She's
Okay.
a deviant.
Okay.
But that leads into My Need, and this is a highlight for me.
It's a highlight for me too.
Also,
Look,
as well.
You've got the Diana Ross Love Hangover sample. You had the vocal interpolation from Your All I Need.
Yeah.
Only thing I'm missing from this is meth. If you had Method Man on this, that joint would have been crazy. But I love this song so much.
Something about My Need. Also, it feels like it's the sister track to on her last album. That's the Way Love Goes. It's something about like the vibe, the group, like the bass line is something about it.
It's that Jam and Lewis thing, and I think I love the like the little floaty things that they have.
Yes.
I just love that. Like they are unique in that.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't think anybody ever felt like Janet was like a vocal powerhouse, but she just does a beautiful job of like using her voice and finding the sound that like complements it. And I think like this song is an example of that.
Yeah. Love this track. Fasten Your Seatbelts.
I don't even remember this.
I'm drawing a blank.
Okay.
So now we get into Go Deep. Obviously, highlight. Right.
This might be my highlight of highlights. Just for the fake
the way
quick
you talked
thing.
about it. Yes.
Just for the fake quick beat, which I actually thought was a quick beat growing up in the same way we thought that it was a Dilla beat.
Yeah.
And I still play that. Like when I'm DJ, I'll still play this song at a house party. I love this song.
Look. So I walk my dog at night, and usually I listen to a podcast, but this past week I've been listening to this album, and My Need comes on right before Go Deep. So these two songs, I've just like literally, I've been walking my dog on the street, doing my little step that I like to do, going into the hallways, doing my bop, not caring about anybody else. My dog is looking at me like I'm weird, but I'm like, yo, to go from My Need to Go Deep, I
think outside of me being a kid who wishes he was at this party, I think this song is just a great song.
It is a great song.
Yeah,
it's a great song.
Yeah, I think it's great and it's playful. And when you think about the other themes, it's just a very nice highlight.
You know, one other thing I want to say before we finish the first half of the album, yo, like, did Q-Tip steal Ray Elizondo's girl while working on this album? Because Q-Tip has talked about, you know, in subtext, how he dated Janet and they were together, maybe like during the Poetic Justice time and some other times, right? So Ray Elizondo, which is Renee Elizondo, which is her husband, was a co-writer on most of this album.
Yes.
She asked to get Q-Tip on one of the songs because she said his voice was perfect for what she was looking for. Blah, blah. But then she dated Q-Tip, so...
Well, she dated Bobby as well, right?
She dated... Well, that was... Yo, is Janet a serial cheater?
I don't know.
All right, anyway.
Look, she's free to do what she want to do. You know what I mean?
Anyway.
Women's empowerment. Go ahead.
So, exactly.
Okay. So that's interesting that, you know, she gets Q-Tip on this joint and then, you know, later they have a romantic relationship. That's interesting. Anyway.
So then we get into Free Zone. And this is another highlight
It's
for
a
me.
highlight for sure.
Yeah.
Look, the fact that some of the hip hop samples that it uses are really, really good. You got the the Tighten Up, I think, and then the Think About It as well.
Yeah.
It's a drum and bass song, which I think is appropriate given the subject matter because that's like drum and bass is really big in the UK, and that's like, you know, real free love and this, that, and the other. What I will say about this though, and look, there is some recency bias with what I'm about to say. And I understand that in the context of 1997, this might have been a big deal. But this is kind of like a safe song when it comes to these themes. They're not, but if you actually listen to the lyrics, she's not, it's not really, it's kind of shallow. There's not like real depth.
It's a pop song, though.
It is a pop. Well, was it a pop song? Because it's not like it was a single.
It might have been a single, actually.
Free Zone?
I don't know.
Free Zone, yeah, right, it wasn't.
I don't think it was a single. When I think of Free Zone, I think of just how choreography and dance is so integral to like her whole thing. So it gives me, even if it's not house, it gives me house vibes.
Yeah.
It gives like that the spirit of house, I guess.
Yeah.
With the
This was the record that like the LGBTQ community
Well,
gave her
several.
like awards for.
That was
Together Again, right?
Together Again.
Okay,
Yeah.
Together.
Free Zone is the one where Free is she starts it off like talking about like he liked this guy on the plane, but
And then he
found out
found
he was gay.
yeah.
That's not mellow or whatever.
that's that free.
Yeah, and so then she goes into the like boy meets girl, boy meets boy, boy likes girl, or whatever. I forget what it is. She's just not really saying all that much.
It's very spoken word a
Yeah,
little bit.
that's
And
true.
we
Like-
know how you feel about spoken word.
It
but
gave me like Madonna Vogue type of vibes.
I can see
the
that.
vocal,
I can see that.
performance.
so it does kind of feel poppy.
yeah.
Yeah, it is poppy in that regard. Yeah.
Nevertheless, this is in my run. It's a highlight for me. I
Yeah.
just think that it's talking about, it's like one rule, no rules. And I get that, but it's all very like safe things if you're talking about. Maybe in 1997 it might have been much more controversy, but
I think that's why the choreo kind of comes to mind, like just in terms of.
Oh, so this one had a video.
Well,
No,
no.
I
But I'm
didn't.
just saying, like, if you think about Janet as an artist, she's very much known for her choreo as well, or her dance,
Yep.
like, and her dancers. And that was one thing that definitely stood out to me about like what I remember about the Velvet Road tour is like
Yeah,
the dance. Like
that's
this was
true.
like a perfect opportunity to have dance to advocate for a community
Got it.
that most likely is the community that's going to be participating. So I think it's.
This is also a run for me, right? Through Together Again, and I think
I extended even further, but go ahead.
I think Free Zone and Together Again to me are a precursor to what Beyonce is doing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like
that's for sure.
It's basically
Yeah.
like the blueprint for what we've got right now in pop music.
So look, let's get into Together Again, which is a highlight for me.
Yeah.
But we just have to make mention again of the interlude Memory. She says that you don't have to hold on to the pain, to hold on to the memories. And this is such a beautiful song. So this is her song that's a tribute to all her friends that she lost to AIDS, right? Now, the interesting thing about this song is that the label almost didn't want to put it on the album because of what it meant. But if you really listen to the lyrics, like
It's very
it doesn't mention anything about having.
Well,
It's just about losing someone. Go ahead.
I think. Well, no, I was gonna say that's interesting because Free Zone is literally talking about
Yes.
those things.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why I kind of put the two songs together.
Yeah.
No, and I think that they're very appropriately placed in that regard.
Yeah.
But look, this is a song that I love. Like I love the video. It's this dance track, this housey dance vibe, kind of like a disco thing. And then where it's set, it looks like it's like shot in like the Serengeti or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You've got this very the people who she's dancing with, they're very colorful vibe. And I mean, it's not just black. It's white, it's yellow, it's red, it's whatever.
Yeah.
And then you've got some folks who
colorful outfits and
and you've got some folks whose energy I can recognize now as being like, oh, that's probably a very, free loving vibe, right? But then just like everything else about the imagery. And the way her hair is set up is actually the same way her hair is set up from God Till It's Gone. But it's just it's a very beautiful song. It sold 6 million records worldwide.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I still play the song sometimes in my DJ sets.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful song. It doesn't feel forced. It feels very authentic in the messaging, but it's also authentically Janet. And I think it marries so many things that we love about her.
Yeah. Now this goes into another highlight for me, musically, and this goes into the online interlude and then Empty, right? So Empty is a song that's a highlight for me, and it's about forming a connection with someone online, but then that being empty. And so I think the thing that I love about this sequencing after Together Again is that a lot of actually the melody and her in her verse and her vocal sounds kind of like that from Together Again, but it's like a contrast. So Together Again, it's about like, all right, I've lost, like you're an angel now. Can't wait for you to wrap your rings around me. You've lost, and I'm trying to get together again. But Empty is like, oh, I'm connected with you, but when you're not there, like there's just like this loss that I feel, and like the contrast of those two things, I thought was very something that maybe I'm reading too much into it artistically, but I actually don't think I am. I think it's very intentional.
I think that's accurate.
It's interesting. I saw some little, and I didn't read the whole thing, but there was some article, and it was kind of talking about how like the online empty thing was kind of like a precursor to like social media, and how like she was, commenting on social networks and our emptiness, and it's probably way more, it
wasn't even
today,
as prevalent,
right, than it was back then.
There's a quote that she says, I like computers and I use them to write and communicate with people all over the world. I believe computers are capable of tremendous good, but I also think about people whose only connection to other people is through a computer. I wonder what kind of reality that creates and what kind of romantic frustrations it produces. After the machine is turned off and the electronic glow fades away, I wonder if you feel empty.
Janet has some foresight.
Yeah, because that's literally
the culture. Today. Yeah, now.
Yeah. Here's the one thing I have to add about why this ends my artistic run and what's so great about it is that you're familiar with the idea of like the bass drop, right? And like the dopamine rush that people get when their anticipation in a song is fulfilled. Are you guys familiar with this concept? So they do something in a song where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's nothing, right? Which is like so clever because whenever I hear 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm thinking something, and nothing is there, and it's just like this build up to something that's just like, oh, it's not there, and that had to be intentional. There's no other reason why you would put 1, 2, 3, 4 like in a song like this and just have it lead to nothing. It's like, I don't know. It's really
but it made you feel empty.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me feel like, oh, like I'm unfulfilled. I'm missing something.
Mission accomplished.
There it is.
So, and then she ends that with she's saying, oh, so this is a really, really, really clever thing that she does as well, right? So the interlude is called Full, and it says out, empty of me to be so full of you. But the thing is like, while she says so empty, that's like the previous track. It goes into What About You. And so What About You is a large part about her ex who used to make her feel like you'd be nothing without me. Nobody would like you. So it's like, how empty of me to be so full of you to then go into that song is so clever for me. I don't know. Like, I love these like album arrangements. I nerd out about this stuff like that. It's the reason why I love the Beatles' Abbey Road. And I'm hearing it all throughout this album, and it's just like, I'm just nerding out.
Sean Price did it on the last album we did.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Give you props for that.
All right.
So, but how you guys feel about What About?
I think What About, for me, the first time I heard it, it was very jarring, especially when you think about the other songs that were released before that. And, at the time, there were like whispers of certain aspects of her personal life that the assumption was essentially everything was rumor. Like, you didn't know, like, she never really confirmed nor denied a lot of stuff that was going on in her life. And so, What About it was just very jarring. It was clearly personal. And then also for her to, I think there's an aspect of empowerment if you've, gone through or experienced emotional abuse, among other things. Like part of the journey is feeling strong enough to even, stand up to or even articulate like what that experience is. And so for her to put that in music form, I think it's empowering to people who possibly have experienced that, but then it's also empowering for her that it sounds like it's catharsis for her to be able to put this song on here.
That's interesting. I think musically, it feels like the continuation of Scream. And Scream was was a big deal for me because I was a huge Michael Jackson fan growing up and Janet. So love it musically. Love, like you said, how jarring it is in terms of the sound of it and where it's placed. I think that the subject matter is also interesting as well because, like you're saying, I don't think we were as obsessed with celebrity relationships back then, or maybe just our age, but people still kind of were. And so, for us to know that she was with one of the DeBarges, everybody knows about the DeBarge family and kind of how drugs and things like that were a part of their story. And so for her to kind of, talk about her own story and give us some of that subtext, but through her own lens, I think is also very, very interesting.
For me, it's a highlight as well. And this is one of our, like, the rock song, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's so clever, again, about the musical arrangement of this song is that it starts off rather tender, very soft, right? Very apologetic. And that's what he is saying to her, right? And she's hearing that. And that's in the, oh, I'm sorry, baby. Like, I just get so mad. I'm so frustrated, but I love you, this, that, and the other. And it's just like, yo, but you just fucking clocked my face, right? And so that's where it transitions into like this hard rock heavy hook, where that's the internal dialogue that she's having in her head, right? The other thing too that's really, really cool is that like there's two choruses, if you will. There's like this chorus A and there's chorus B. So the way it starts off is the first time it gets to the chorus, you just hear chorus A. Then the second time you get to the chorus, it's chorus A and chorus B. And then the third time is chorus A, chorus B, and then back again to chorus A. So the fact that it's just like, no, you keep talking, but all you're doing is just like filling me up with this rage. And I just got to let it out. Again, I'm nerding out to this musical stuff that I'm not sure if they meant to be in there, but I'm catching it. So
Jam and Lewis, man.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I also think, this is the only, and maybe it's the only song that needs to really talk about that. But if you think about all of the other, like the themes of the other songs, in relation to the whole album, it's diary, right? It's like a diary entry, but it doesn't necessarily, like the other themes, it's very specific. That particular song is very specific to that theme. That's it. Like, it's like, I'm just going to touch on this and I'm going to move on.
Yeah, and then move on.
And so we move on to Every Time, which is not a low light for me, but it's not a highlight either. Go ahead, Haas.
It's cool. Like, I appreciate it, but that might just be, I do feelings and shit. So
I think it was a highlight for me as well.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd have to play it again to remember why, but I definitely noted it down as a highlight.
I think what I remember from seeing the video was just like this vulnerability and this nakedness. That, clearly this whole album is about being vulnerable and being open, but it's like the visual representation of that.
Sounds like a video I need to see.
Yeah, so.
It's Janet Jackson. She's not wearing any clothes. She's in a
you know what I mean? Sold.
Almost like a cleansing too. Yeah, her just floating around in water.
Wow.
It's not a low light for me. It's just like if you took this song in a vacuum and just listened to it on itself, that's not the kind of like soft pop. That's not my bag.
Yeah, I don't need it.
Now that being said, what the song is talking about, like why it's scared to like fall in love, given the songs that come before it, and again that transition, that sequencing is brilliant. So it's I think it needs to be on the record. It's just not, musically, it's not my vibe. Like, I'm not going to go to this album just to listen to the song. Whereas a lot of the ones who came before this, like, if I'm just in the mood to listen to Go Deep or My Need or whatever, I'm just going to listen to this album.
You don't love this joint?
With a soft piano.
Every time? Yeah. I remember this joint being on the radio all the time.
But it's kind of her ballad, though.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It
So,
is.
like, when you think of, like, okay, vocally, no, but Tony, Unbreak My Heart, you know what I'm saying? Like, the construction of this song is very ballady, like,
It sounds great. The writing
I'm not going to try to sway
amazing.
you. I'm just saying.
No. The writing is
The
good.
writing is amazing. The key, key arrangement is amazing. The arrangement of the song is great. This is the ballad on this joint.
Look, like I said, it's not a low light. I like the inclusion of the record. It's just not a song that I would go to just to listen to. Like, I'm not, those aren't my kind of things.
Sure.
But now we get into Tonight's the Night. And this is a very interesting one.
Yeah, because it's a cover?
It is a cover.
Yeah.
It is a cover. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's so, like, I don't need it.
Yeah.
In relation to everything else that she's talking about, I can understand why it's there, but I think not even because it's the cover, but I just think vocally this would be a low light for me.
Okay. Do you know why she chose to do that? Like, I don't love or hate it. It's fine. My dad loved Rod Stewart growing up. So I've listened to, a lot of his music.
Are you familiar with the Rod Stewart version?
Yes, but it just didn't resonate.
Before we get into that, because I think that's very important. One of my potential low light, again, look, some of this is recency bias. And when I talked about, I was like, all right, I think that some of these themes that you guys are attributing to some of these songs are a little forced. she got praised by not regendering the song. So this is the song that Rod Stewart is singing to a girl. And she just sings, she doesn't change any of the lyrics, right? And so it makes it seem like, okay, she's is going to she's seducing a woman that they're about to make love for like the first time and possibly even add another person as well. And it's like, I get in 1997, this might have been a big deal. So I fully acknowledge that.
Right.
But I think like this is not the only time I've heard songs from where the male or the female has switched roles, but they haven't changed the lyrics. Yeah. For example, Donald Glover did this when he did To Me As I'm So Into You. He got on this
but
YouTube
Donald
shit.
Glover is 20, 30 years later.
That's fine. I get that, right? So I understand at the time it might have been a big deal, but it's also like this was one of her mom's favorite songs, and she just loves this song.
Okay, that's why.
And so it's just like she just wanted to do the song. It's like, do I think that she made it a point to like, no, like I'm going to be, maybe she did, maybe she didn't.
Yeah.
But the ironic thing about this though is that Rod Stewart, this is actually one of his most controversial songs. And I think the reason why is because he's talking about taking a woman's virginity. A girl's virginity. Because he doesn't say woman, he says girls. And so it's just like, bruh, so for her to cover this song and to put that twist on it, if you will, it's just, I don't know, I just find it amusing.
So I think, like I said, I understand why she kept it in terms of, everything else that's being discussed in the album. And I mean, I think in the context of her being a Black woman, it's still very much, kind of taboo to a certain extent. So at that time, that was very bold of her. And then also for her to not change it. So it's like theme wise and what it stands for, I don't mind it being there, but like I didn't have to have it.
I think though, to shoot her some bail, I guess, right? Like when a man talks about taking a girl's virginity, that's one thing. Yeah. When a woman who was Penny on Good Times is now talking about possibly maybe having a sexual encounter with another woman. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, and then your brain is going, okay, well, did she misgender it on purpose? You know what I mean? Like I think that the question marks, they may have done on purpose, and that might be a genius kind of decision to be made.
Look, like I said, I completely acknowledge that in the context of 1997, it was probably a big deal.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the song in 1997. I heard it, I didn't even hear the song back in like 2008. Like this is one of the ones I skipped.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the song until like the last 3-4 years, where it's like it doesn't hit me the same.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
likewise.
But now we get into I Get Lonely.
Yeah.
Not a highlight for me, but I'm assuming it is for y'all. Yeah. I don't dislike the song. It's just not a highlight.
No, this was one of my highlights. Probably second to Got Till It's Gone. But I think that's just personal nostalgia associated with that. It's like you got that. It's that good R&B.
It is.
Yes.
You have the video that you want to copy the choreo.
That's true.
Yeah.
Janet, I'm pretty sure that I copied one of her outfits in college. Like this is years later, and I, found a reason to wear an outfit similar to something that she had going on in there. But this was something that I think my peers were more still talking about I Get Lonely versus anything else.
Yeah.
And so that was a conversation piece.
I think so. I think this was the Black song on
Yes.
here.
Yes.
And the one thing I will say is I, maybe even out of protest, did not listen to this song all the way until Friday. On Friday, the 25th anniversary or whatever version of 20th, 25th anniversary of this album came out with the remixes, which included the Blackstreet version of this song. And it was not on streaming. And I think I may have even mentioned this before on our podcast. I was like, how is the Blackstreet version not on here? Because I just feel like the ad-libs of them going back and forth with her were amazing. Like you said, the video was great.
Yeah.
Like their energy together is great. And to me, the version on here, it feels absent without them. Like I can hear where their voices are supposed to be. Like, oh man, I can't do it without them.
That's so interesting because when I think of it, I don't think of Blackstreet
Oh my God,
at all.
And the even like if we were to play the two next to each other, the extra instrumentation that Teddy Riley added in, there's Timbaland doing a beatbox.
Yes. I was going to say, this sounds like a Timbo-inspired beat.
Timbaland and Teddy Riley did it together.
Wow.
And they sampled Timbo doing a beatbox. So like, it's just so Virginia.
A lot of his music.
Yeah, like that was like one of his things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so Virginia. I love it. I love that version of the song. If that version was on this album, it might be my highlight of highlights. I fucking love that song. So yeah, I like this song too.
Was that on the soundtrack?
It
sounds like it could have been.
It sounds like a song that would have been.
It might have been.
It definitely gives like in that era of black movies, it gives like that should have been on somebody's like, score for something. Yeah.
But the way that man is crooning for that woman, yo, that's like Jodeci vibes. Like I won't know, yo, he's going crazy. I love it.
Look, it is a standard R&B hit. I don't dislike the song at all. It's just not one of my highlights.
Gotta break it down, break it down, break it down.
That's fair. But see, this was not the R&B that I was really in tune with in the 90s. Like man, I wasn't. Yeah.
This is when Missy and Timbaland changed the whole format of how R&B sounded.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I will say, I do love the line, I'm so lonely that only you can hold me. I think that that's a really, really powerful thing to say.
I think, but that's like Janet and vulnerability. Like that's that yearning. Like she does a great job of articulating that and exuding that. But I feel that.
So now we get into Rope Burn. And this is our BDSM stuff.
I think for me, the only thing that stood out to me about this record is the fake DJ Quick glockenspiel again. Because I love DJ Quick and I love when people emulate him. But yeah, this song's cool.
It's cool. It's not a highlight for me, but I do like, again, the reference to the Velvet Rope.
Yeah, I like that concept.
I mean? Yeah, I like it too.
Yeah.
So, and I think that this was probably Madonna was probably good at doing this as well. But the idea that you could be, have some kind of sexual desire, but it doesn't necessarily have to say anything about like who you really are. And the vulnerability to be in the safe space to ask for it and to receive it, I think is very, very important. The song itself is fine.
I think more recently, I'm realizing that I might have an irrational distaste for Madonna. I do not like Madonna.
That's fair.
And I do not like how it feels like it always felt like she almost avatared black culture.
I don't think it's irrational.
I feel like we talk about her and we're like, oh, Madonna, but then when you talk about like all the things that she did, like they feel so opportunistic and almost Elvis-y. Like even you heard the interview that got leaked with Michael Jackson where he was talking about how Madonna was trying to date him because she was trying to like blow up her career. And she pulled some shit where I guess she invited him on a date, but he kind of couldn't really tell if it was a date or if it was like just like a friend lunch type of thing. But then like when he like got there or whatever, there was like all these cameras around and shit because she was trying to get this photo op so she could say that like she dated Michael Jackson. And he was talking about how much he hated her, but like it was like one of those things where it was like a hot mic, like somebody had recorded it, and he was like, yeah, I do not like her, like she's blah 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 blah. And then you look at her trying to date Drake recently, like more recently, like in the last 10 years.
Well, yeah,
and like her kissing somebody on an award show. I don't remember if it was Nicki Minaj or who it was, but
I can't remember.
Her, dating Big Daddy Kane and this one and that one. It's just like you using black culture as an avatar. Whether you really like it, like she seems to appreciate black culture or like it, but like. How white people use black culture and then when they're done with it, they put it away.
It's like that
really,
cycle.
Really, I hate that. And I feel like Madonna's like an early example of that. And it kind of disgusts me that at her age, she's still trying to do that.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, but I mean, if it works for her, why would she stop? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not disagreeing, but
I ain't gotta like it.
No, not at all, not at all.
Yeah, I don't like Madonna.
I don't think it's irrational.
Yeah. And I can acknowledge that she got some bangers. Like she got some big records.
Yeah,
I just don't like her as a person,
That's fair.
or at least her persona.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of Madonna, but like artistically, I respect some of the things that she did for sure.
Likewise.
Yeah. So anything. This is a highlight for me.
I don't remember this record.
Wait, what's the hook? Oh yes, yes.
Which one is
Okay,
this
so
one?
that's grown. It's grown.
Oh yeah, I guess this is one of the ballads too.
It is, but the thing I love about this is that this is kind of like a precursor to a lot of that alternative R&B that I find myself like digging.
But this is the record to me that is the anytime, any place, like kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
like
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
style
yeah, yeah.
type of record. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did like this joint.
Yeah.
It's very, it's grown. It's come over.
Yeah.
It's we gonna set a mood.
Yeah.
It seduces you. I think that track does.
And
It's
she's
great
like
with
the best
seduction.
at that.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing too I love is that there's like a little instrument that they use that sounds very much like the main instruments in Moments of Love.
Okay.
And so it's just like there's certain songs that they create like the
Moments of
certain,
Love is a sexy joint.
What'd you say?
I said Moments of Love
is.
is a sexy joint. Yeah.
It is.
too.
And so you think about that song, so then you hear the instrument and you're automatically
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about
that's
sex,
real.
right? It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of wrap up the album. We have interlude sad, which is there's nothing more depressing than having everything and feeling sad, which I think is I can't tell you how many celebrity crash and burn stories have to do with that. Like, oh, you had everything, and then you still feel empty. You
Isn't
still
that
feel
like
sad.
what like Drake's like all his songs are about?
Probably. Yeah. And then the girl who he disregarded, not like dropping everything to come see him. There's that as well. There's two like hidden tracks which I'm less familiar with. So,
Haven't heard either of them.
Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah.
I'm not as well familiar with, and they're not even on Spotify anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah. Do you have anything to add with that?
No, I think you wrapped it up quite nicely.
Cool.
Hey.
So no, any closing thoughts?
Nah, I'm glad we got to cover a Janet album, and I'm glad that Haas was able to join us
Of
to
course.
cover.
Yes,
a
thank
Janet
you
album.
for having me.
Yeah.
All right. So that should wrap it up for our discussion on Velvet Rope. Hope you all enjoyed it.
Peace.